Hi everyone. Welcome back to another session in our series of deep dive with transformers where we were trying to understand in a very detailed manner how a transformer works, what's its architecture and how are different processes going on behind the hood. And for this thing we were referring to the blocks by J. Alama. Till now, I think we have already done 3 or 4 segments of this video and we are continuing the series. In case if you haven't watched the series, I would recommend you to go back and watch the different segments that we have covered in the series till now. Till now, if we go on a high level, what we did is we saw an outro of what a transformer has, what are different components, and then trying to understand the encoder and decoder, how they are stacked, and then having a very deep dive or detailed understanding of how an encoder is working. So now in this particular segment, we are going to discuss about the decoder side of transformers. In that particularly, what is happening is where we like if we try to understand where we're using the decoder, it's like in the decoder one is we are passing the outputs and at the same time we are passing the outputs that we got from the encoder block. So for example, this was the input that I had, input sentence, and then I converted those things into embeddings. And then I converted those things, embeddings with time signals, and then I passed those things to the encoder block. From the output of one encoder, I passed those outputs to the second encoder block. From this, I generated some output. And that output, I passed to the decoder, decoder first, and then those things to the decoder too. And then finally, those things were passed to the linear and softmax layer to give us the output one by one. So moving further, if you try to understand now exactly what happened is first if we have predicted the first word, now exactly what is happening is for the input that this thing is there, so I have computed this thing. Now particularly I'm passing this thing and at the same time I'm passing the m also. Earlier in if in the one go I pass all the output words, what's exactly going to happen is the model will know like the attention scores of this word with respect to the all the words that are going to come, and it's particularly going to give me this next word only that was going to come because it already knows the answer. So what I try to do is for all the words that are after my current word, I try to mask those words for the so that my decoder model is not able to have that particular answer and it guesses that particular answer. So this is what I do, and first and once I have got this particular word, now what I particularly try to do is I move on to these things. Now I took these things and the encoded values that we have to get the third word that I have, and similarly for the fourth word and the later on. And the reason for masking is if I directly give the answers to my transfer models, then transfer model is going to give that particular answer only and it's not learning anything. So particularly this is what they have said. They operate in slightly different way, and in decode is only allowed to attend earlier positions in the output sequence, so that we mask all the future positions by setting them to minus infinity before the softmax step. So the encoder decoder attention layer just work like the multi-head self attention, and it just the only difference is this one that we mask the values. And now particularly what we are doing like in from the final linear and the softmax layer. So the softmax output a vector of floats. Now how do we convert these vectors or these different floats or integers values into word? That's the job of the final linear layer, which is followed by a softmax layer. And the linear layer is that we have is a simply fully connected neural network that projects the vector produced by the stack of decoders in much a sense much larger vectors called a logit vector. So let's assume that our model knows around 10,000 unique words in English, or maybe generally from the perspective of the model, we say it as an output vocabulary that is learned from the training data set. Now this would make a logit vector that we had 10,000 cells wide, each cell corresponding to the score of a unique word. This is how we interpret the output of the model followed by the linear layer. Now the softmax layer then turns those scores that we have got for each and every particular word into probabilities, and the cell with the highest probability is chosen. So for example, in the decoder step output, the we got a vector of floats. Now this thing is passed to a linear layer in which what is happening is we particularly got some values, some scores for all the different words that we had in a vocabulary. Now we applied a softmax layer on top of that, so that now we got probability for each and every word that we had in a vocabulary. And the word having the highest vocabulary in this particular output that we had is chosen as the output. So in this case, if it's five, it's fifth word that we had, and the fifth word that we had in our vocabulary was M. So now, particularly if we try to understand, like now the decoder part that we have is kind of like one pass of that thing is completed. So now if we try to zoom out and see what exactly has happened in the hood is particularly, we have covered the entire forward pass that we can use to train the transformer. Now, during trained untrained model, we'll go to the exact same forward pass, but since we are training it on a label training set, we will compare its output to the actual correct output. And particularly, to mark the end of sentence, we use the EOS tag. And it in this particularly it tells about like the if we have the one vector by the name am, so if we do hot encoding for the am it would be one, and for the other words it would be zero. That's what they are explaining here. So particularly in the model, if we try to see what the loss function that we had, so particularly why we are coming to this segment of loss, because there is one the actual output that we have, and there is one the predicted output that we had from the model. And our aim, or the aim generally in the training of these machine learning models, is trying to reduce the loss to the minimum value possible, so that our model is much more accurate or better in terms of performance metrics that we have. So particularly the untrained the model that we had, it might have this particular output. However, the correct and desired output was this thing. And particularly, how do we compare these things? Compare these two laws. So he told about like a we can maybe simply subtract one from another, or maybe we can use the cross entropy, Kullback, Liber divergence, and others. However, like this thing is a very simple format. However, when we do this thing for millions of words for thousands and thousands of training sessions, it's like a much more complex things. Maybe if we try to see here, like as they have mentioned, like this is oversimplified. Like we use a sentence which is longer than this thing. If you want a model to successfully output probability distributions where each probability distribution is represented by a vector with vocab size. For example, a realistic number is sometimes 30, 50,000, or maybe in most of the cases 100,000 words. And then the first probability distribution has the highest probability at the cell associated with the word I. The second is the highest with the M, and so on until. So particularly, this is maybe he is trying to make us understand like the scale at which we do these we are doing these computations in the real transformer models that we have. Like this is maybe the desired the target that we have, but like after we do a numerous iterations, maybe this is the model that we had, the model with different weights or the scores, the output that we are getting. So particularly, this was it of like the whole architecture of neural network that we had. And if you want to get much more deeper dive into this thing and to understand the exact architecture, the exact hyperparameters that the authors choose for attention is all you need paper, maybe you can go to the paper that they have written. Transform attention is all you need. So, and like for all what we have discussed, maybe I'll just go into brief of what exactly has happened with the help of two diagrams that we had. The first diagram that we had is in a transformer model. We are using We are particularly taking an input sentence, then using transformers to translate that sentence and getting an output. And in that particularly, a transformer models consist of encoder and decoder components. And each of the encoder and decoder components might consist multiple encoder and decoders stacked into them. And for each of the encoder block, there are two main layers that we have. First is the self-attention and second is the feed-forward neural network. Now the decoder also has similar layers. However, if you have encoder decoder mechanism, there is one more layer where we merge through the encoder output and the decoder output that we have using the encoder decoder attention. And particularly understanding what's happening with the words that we had. Maybe I'll try to explain it with the help of this example. In this particular, we had one input sentence, then we got the embeddings for those words, then we tried to have the initial weights of key Korean value pairs through which we get key Korean value. And for all the attentions that we have, we try to find the attention heads of those things, then concatenate all those attention heads, multiply it with a weight matrix, and then get the final head for the one of the encoder block. One got attention of one of the multi-headed output of multi-head attention of one of the encoder blocks. Through this, we might get the reference or the attention or the context of one word with respect to the like all words with respect to the all the different words that were there. And then particularly before uh, passing the embeddings, we do positionally encode them so that we also pass the data of the positions of the words because it does make a lot of difference where a particular word is coming in the sentence. So in uh, summing up, if we try to see what all steps were involved in a very small example of transform model is we had encoder block and then output of those encoder block was passed to a second encoder block and that was passed to the decoder block that we had. And then we understood what exactly is happening in the decoder block and one of the main differences, subtle differences that was happening in decoder, we try to mask the further outputs of the sentence and we give the outputs or the word embeddings, the right word embeddings until the place we have given the input, like the words of the output sentence. And all in all, in all of these things, in the one of the very good things, the place where attention mechanism or the transfer modules are much better than the RNNs or the LSTMs that we had earlier is we are doing parallel processing. Like when we are passing inputs, we are passing all the input word embeddings all at once. We are computing all these computations all at once in parallel. So one of the main things that it is helping us is to achieve better increased efficiency. At the same time, we are doing so many computations with an increased efficiency. And then finally understanding the decoder side. And this is how exactly we are getting output of word by word. And finally, if we got an output, like how do we exactly say which word is it? And then from that particularly, we try to find out what's the loss and try to reduce the loss to get the maximum output for our transform models. So thank you everyone for being there and attentive till here, till the last part of the Transformer more deep dive with Transformer series that we have. I think we might be having one or two sessions after this, where we will be discussing about the different Transformer models, different LLMs, the most used LLMs out there. For example, if we see the GPT models, GPT's Chat GPT, what everyone talks about these days, it's nothing but a generative pre-trained transformers. The BERT model that was released by Google earlier, it was nothing but bidirectional encoded representative transformers. So yeah, we'll discuss those things in the next session. And thank you everyone for being here till now. Let me know for the feedback and suggestions. Please let me know in comments. Thank you very much.